Eric Monte is an American screenwriter, producer, and author. He was born Kenneth Williams on December 20th, 1943, in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up in the Cabrini Green Housing Project. From a young age, he met the ugliness of racism with a determination to make the world a better place. He said that I was 5 years old and I loved cowboys, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and the Lone Rangers. And I had this little broomstick horse, and I was riding around like it was a horse. And this big old white guy came up to me. Now that I look back at it, he might not have been that big or that old, but he was definitely white. And he said, "Who are you supposed to be?" And I rode back on my little broomstick horse and I said, "I'm the Lone Ranger." So he said, "You can't be the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger is white." So I made a vow that when I grew up, I was going to make some black heroes. Eric went to Edwin C. Coolie High School, the school that he based his movie on. He dropped out at the age of 17 and went into the Army. After his stint was over, he decided he was going to go to California to make it as a writer. His mom was not convinced that he would be able to make his dreams a reality, however. She said they have never ever had a black writer in Hollywood. If they ever get one, he's going to be some high yellowed black with a Harvard degree, not some high school dropout from Cabrini. However, Monte thankfully didn't listen to her and hitchhiked with $5 in his pocket to California. It took 5 years for him to get his big break, but he did not give up. In the meantime, he had met Mike Evans at a community college, and later Mike had received a job acting in All in the Family. He asked Eric to help him expand his role, so Eric wrote a script that got accepted, and that's how he got his first break. He was hired as a writer by Norman Lear, the producer of the show. During his time writing for Norman Lear, he pitched the idea to have a black entrepreneur who owned a chain of dry cleaning stores live with his wife next to Archie Bunker. Eventually, this was turned into the show The Jeffersons, and Norman Lear was credited as creator, never giving Eric Monte the credit he was due. Eric next teamed up with his friend Mike Evans, and they created Good Times, which was based on his childhood growing up in the Cabrini Greens project. Eric said that Norman Lear considered my work too controversial. I pitched Good Times in 1971. It didn't go on the air until 1974. In those 3 years, we had about 20 meetings. The one note in every meeting was, "Get rid of the father. A strong black man in a sitcom won't work." He further said that working on Good Times was real hard. All the white writers wanted to do stereotypes, and I refused, thank goodness. Every week we argued and fight. They would ignore what I suggested and take all that "yes, a boss" stuff to the cast, and John, Amos, and Esther Roll would have a fit. Then they'd give them what I wrote, and the cast would like it, and they'd shoot it, and it would go to air. The next week, it was the same fight. Originally, I pictured JJ as a street smart hustler who drove his honest, hardworking parents crazy. The picture above shows Eric acting in his one and only time on the series in season 1, episode 2, called Black Jesus. He played the runner. Good Times was a highly successful show, consistently in the top 20, and was the first sitcom centered around a black family. It ran for 6 years, ending in 1979, although many people say it ended for them with the exit of John Amos as the father, who was let go because he tried to stand up for the reality of the black family compared to what the white writers were writing for him. Next, Eric Monte wrote the screenplay for the 1975 film Coolie High, which was based off of his time in high school. It has been called one of the greatest teen movies and coming-of-age films ever made. Although it was made for a modest sum, it grossed over $13 million worldwide and inspired the success of the TV show The White Shadow, as well as Eric's next creative project, What's Happening, which was about three working class African American teens who lived in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Watts. The show was modestly successful, and the series ended in 1979, the same year as Good Times did. 2 years before that, in 1977, Eric filed a $400 million lawsuit against Norman Lear, ABC, CBS, his agents, and others, stating that they stole his ideas for Good Times, the Jeffersons, and What's Happening. Why did he sue his own agents? Because they signed a deal with Norman Lear behind his back. In the end, Eric was given a very, very small fraction of what he asked for. He was given only $1 million. Although he first tried to decline the settlement, his lawyers threatened to quit, and because he was unable to find other representation before the statute of limitations ran out, he was forced to accept their offer. Eric said, "As soon as I filed that lawsuit, all of my offers dried up. Nobody in Hollywood would talk to me. I was blacklisted." Eric next wrote a play titled If They Come Back, which followed the lives of two teenage boys during the civil rights movement. It was not well received, but believing in it, he moved the play from the Inner City Cultural Center to the Henry Ford Theater. He paid for this out of his money from the lawsuit, which took up about 2/3 of it. Because the play was not successful, he never recovered that money. That, combined with the loss of his career in television due to his being blacklisted just for trying to get what was owed to him, caused him to make some poor decisions, which ultimately ended in his losing his home that he shared with his two daughters, his car, and in the end, he ended up in a homeless shelter. He said of his time there, "My living in the shelter and my being broke, I see that as a minor inconvenience. Life is way too short for me to let some idiotic thing like this make me unhappy. Please know I'm not sad about anything. I love life. My work ain't over." Eric has written a few scripts and a few books, but never recaptured his earlier success. It was hard to tell exactly the timeline, but I believe he's living in Portland at an assisted care facility. His granddaughter has a TikTok channel. I think she goes by the name of Lady, and she has stated that he has been diagnosed with dementia. He also had some strokes. In my researching of him, Eric Monte seemed to be forever the optimist, no matter what he went through. He said, "I've never been one to obey the rules unless they made sense to me. If I had to do it over again, I'd do less arguing and more negotiating. I'm just happy to be alive." Before ending this, I would like to thank Eric Monte for the work that he did as a white child growing up in Seattle. I connected with his characters. I wanted to be in a house with a strong father. Unfortunately, I wasn't. And so I really liked the Evans household and was sad when James died. I was a lot sadder as an adult when I found out that Norman Lear wasn't as woke as everybody made him out to be, but instead made millions off of the creativity of Eric Monte. Never really heard about until just a few months ago. As a fellow writer, I was absolutely angered by how much he was taken advantage of. And also by the fact that we don't know what he would have created had he not been blacklisted. I was surprised to find that he did not have a star on Hollywood Walk of Fame, something that really needs to be rectified. I started this petition and I encourage you to please go and sign it and share it with everyone you know. Thank you. If you would like to stay informed when my next video comes out, please like and subscribe and